Three, two. Hey there, Station One listeners, and welcome to another episode. This is our REM at 40, actually, technically 42, but we're talking about the 40th anniversary of the release of their first EP, which is Chronic Town. And that was released in December of 1982. Gosh, that makes me feel really old because I only saw them like a year and a half later. And, it was really interesting to think about REM being that because REM's been a mainstay for me, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk all about REM. And we got a great crew to talk about it. Of course, Mr. Mike Gordon is here,
Howdy.
and at least he's been to Athens, Georgia.
I have been to Athens, yes.
Yes, exactly. So something good came out of Athens. Then it's good.
Yeah, I didn't stick around.
Nope, 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 nope. But it's pretty cool. And of course, joining us, friend of the show, Mr. Kevin Cafferty is here.
Hi, hi, hi.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah,
At least you didn't do it. You were a shiny, happy person for being here tonight.
I'm very excited to talk about REM. I love them so much.
It's pretty.
I was going to say this goes out to all one side. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, we're done with all that, right?
If we do this any longer, it's the end of the world as we know it. So it's okay.
Okay. All right. That's boom.
But I feel fine.
Let's seal up.
Exactly. So don't fall on me, man. It's cool. So we're awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we definitely would love to hear from you guys tonight. Please write us feedback at ourstation1.com. Definitely would love to hear from you. You might notice that something's a little different with the show. We started with this, our last episode. We are changing the format of our Station One a little bit, and you're going to notice slight changes here and there. We're going to be tweaking the show and everything, and we're actually bringing more compact, more dense shows to you guys. Well, many people have said we were pretty dense for years already. Kevin was shutting his mouth right now. I could tell it. He was like, "Nope, don't say it, don't say it." But we're
too many jokes.
It's true. It's true, and it's going to be a lot of fun with the new format. And thank you guys for putting up with it and joining us for this. So we're basically going every couple of days. We're going to be getting a new episode of our Station One. It's going to be coming out twice a week now, and we're going to be doing an episode earlier in the week, and then we're going to have one later in the week. So kind of a la what Mark Maron does with his interviews on his podcast, but ours are not as important as his are. So, but it's going to be a ton of fun anyway. But as we like to say, you now can find us up on YouTube, and you could also find us up on many podcast players. Anywhere you find a podcast, Earth Station One is there. And now you're going to get double the episodes. So it's going to be a ton of fun. And we want to thank you guys for it. If you get a chance, please leave feedback or a thumbs up on YouTube would be great, or a like, or a review would be awesome. Would really, really appreciate it. We got some great feedback from last week's show with Jeremy Miller. It was awesome hanging out with him and talking about the cooking program he's doing and the film festival in Virginia. And we just got a lot of great folks, saying, "Hey, thanks for doing that." And Jeremy was awesome. And one person said, "I couldn't believe little Ben Seaver has grown up like that already." So it was kind of fun to do. And you know what? We're going to bring a lot of cool stuff to you guys over the next couple months. We're already scheduled out already, I think almost to summertime. So I think we got a lot to talk about, and it's going to be fun taking you guys along for the ride. Speaking of taking you guys along for the ride, I want to do a big shout out to our patrons. Our patrons are our lifeblood here on Earth Station One, and also as part of the ESO network. And we couldn't do this without you guys. You guys keep the lights on. You're enabling us to do more exciting stuff on the show, like the new format or the YouTube channel or some other things we have coming up that we can't talk about yet. But it's going to be a lot of fun to see if us change, see us grow, and our patrons are part of this. That's helping us do that. And you too can help support the station for as little as $1 a month. That's right, folks, $1 a month, and you get these shows a couple days early. You also get shows like Earth Station DCU classics. You get rants and raves. You also get transmissions from Atlantis. You also get, of course, the fine folks at, of course, the Watchathon with Rassilon. It's kind of all really cool stuff that you get coming up here on, the Patreon. And you know what? More stuff is coming. We have plans for other shows and might even throw in a bonus, rants and raves sometime. We've been promising it for quite some time. So Mike and I will get around to doing that eventually too. So you guys could do that. And like we said, for as little as $1 a month, you can enjoy the content also. And all you have to do is go to patreon.com/ESO network. Thanks, as we like to say. And
I'm a patron, and I will say to people, it's like being in a cool secret club. So
exactly, it's a secret handshake club, as we like to call it. So, and thank you, Kevin, for helping support us. We do appreciate you.
Thank you for all the awesome content.
There you go. And it's pretty cool too. And what, speaking of cool, new Tifosi sunglasses. That's right. Winter's here. As Kevin was telling us before we got on the air tonight, it's snowing up in Boston. And you know what? Sunglasses are still cool because it gets very bright in the snow. It has glare and everything. And our friends at Tifosi Optic have just the glasses for you. And if you're like me who needs prescription glasses, Tifosi Optical could take care of you there too. All you have to do is go to tifosioptics.com and find out what they have. They have some amazing holiday deals going on. And on top of these deals, your friends at Earth Station 1 are going to give you 10% off. That's right. All you have to do is put in the coupon code Earth Station 1. And you know what? It's pretty cool. You get 10% off your whole order on top of the sale stuff. 10% off, not just one pair of glasses, your whole order. That's pretty awesome. Check it out, tifosioptics.com. Okay, Mr. Mike, ready to talk about R.E.M?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Or should we refer to them as, of course, Mike Stipe, Mike Mills, Peter Buck, and Bill Berry? It's pretty awesome. Got a great foursome there. I think it's pretty amazing that you got this out of Athens, Georgia. I think they might be tied for the top band to come out of Athens, because I think B-52s is up there with them also.
Sure.
So.
I'm just going to say right off the bat that I did not get introduced to them until much later. I think the first album that I can recall from them is Life's First Pageant. It was kind of a perfect time for me and for them to hit, and for me to experience them, because that album came out in '86, and that was my first year in college. So, I mean, talk about the perfect college band, right? Like, but I mean, that was their fourth studio album. So there was a few years, 5, in fact, that they were around that I wasn't aware of. I mean, I think I'd heard Radio Free Europe before, but I don't know if it really, it didn't really hit me to the extent that I was like, oh wow, I need to check these guys out. So yeah, my experience with them came much later. My first experience with them came much later. But Kevin, what about you? When did you experience R.E.M for the first time?
Well, I think I'm a little younger than you guys. So for me, I think it was 1987. I was about 11 years old, and I had a paper route.
Oh, you are so much younger than us.
you are much younger than me. Yeah.
This is one of those core memories. I remember at the time I was listening to a lot of top 40 music on my Walkman. For younger listeners, a Walkman is sort of like an iPod, but it just got the radio and you would play tapes on it. And I started experimenting with the lower end of the dial, just because you're doing a paper, you're just kind of walking around. And I remember I got to one of the college stations, a station called WJMF, which no longer exists, but it was out of a college called Bryant University, which was close to my house where I was growing up. And I heard "It's the End of the World as We Know It," and I Feel Fine. And I genuinely had, at that point, it was the greatest song I had ever heard in my life. It completely blew my mind. I remember running, and I didn't know who it was because they didn't back it out. So I remember running home and getting the phone book to look up the radio station's number, call the radio station.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know what we had to do, people?
Yes. Who did that song? And like the DJ had switched. So it took a while for me to find them. And then like from then on, they were my favorite band, like all through high school. So that was around like when Document It. So that was when they were kind of easing into the mainstream, I would say.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, Mike, you caught them when they were still in their Beatles of college radio phase. But I went back and completely devoured everything they had done up till then. They were my first concert, even.
Really?
Wow.
Yes.
That's pretty
Okay,
awesome.
I definitely want to get to that.
Was it on that tour or?
It was on the Green Tour.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was at a place called Great Woods in Mansfield, which I think
I know it well.
yes.
I don't think it's called Great Woods now, right?
It is not, but it was then. And
it still is to me.
And I saw them on their last tour there as well, with much better seats.
I went to a few shows there. Saw the Sugar Cubes there. That was amazing. Probably my best experience at Great Woods. Anyway.
Oh, with Hill and New Order, right?
Yes. Were you
there? Yes.
That's funny. That's so cool. We might have been sitting right next to each other. We have no idea.
Probably.
Mike, what about you? What was your first experience with R.E.M?
First experience with R.E.M. was because of my parents, actually. They used to listen to a lot of alternative radio and progressive radio stations, as they used to call them back in the 80s. And they used to call it alt rock and college rock and stuff. And we had a radio station in Washington, D.C. called WHFS. And it was, basically it was one of those legacy stations that had been around since the late 60s. And it was, they freeform radio where the DJs brought in their own albums and played their own stuff. And they played this song called Radio Free Europe in 1983. And it was amazing. I heard it because at the time I was a sophomore in high school, and it was awesome. It was just like nothing I had ever heard before. And the singer, the beat, and it was not like anything you heard on MTV. It was not like anything you heard on regular radio. And I went out and I bought that album. I picked up Murmur, and it was probably came out like a month or so before. And it was amazing to listen to it. It was, the lyrics, the singer, because a lot of the music was very fast and everything, but Michael Stipe's singing was almost like it didn't fit in it. It was almost like he was like purposely going slower than the music. And it was hard sometimes to understand what he was saying. He was almost like mumbling in a lot of ways. And it was just awesome, being able to watch them, um being, on David Letterman for the first time, and Michael Stipe wouldn't face the audience. And, or when Dave came out to talk to the band, Mike Stipe wouldn't talk to them. They were talking to Peter Buck and Mike Mills and Bill Berry. And it was just awesome. And, being a 16-year-old kid, it's like, these are the most awesome people in the world, and it was awesome. And it's like, my uncle already was living down here in Georgia. It's like, oh, Athens, I know where that is, that type of thing. So even more hero worship. And then being able to go see them in concert. I think it was in January of 1984, and being snuck into a bar called the Bayou in Georgetown, and being able to go see them. And they were the opening band. I don't even remember who they opened for. And they were just awesome. And I fell in love from there. And I've been addicted to the band ever since. But it's funny too, because I waned from them a bit towards the end and everything. So it was just
we'll definitely talk about, as they progress. But I want to dial it back, because obviously you both, even though you started in different places with different albums, I would imagine you loved them enough and you were interested enough that you went back and to their first album, their first recordings. And I'm wondering, like, especially of Chronic Town, since we're, sort of marking that anniversary, if there's like, what do you notice about Chronic Town as far as their the releases them as to what a prediction of what they would become, or were they still raw, or like what's the experience of listening to Chronic Town like, Kevin?
I think Chronic Town emerges pretty fully formed. One of the things I find interesting about, like, if you go back to REM and you hear their early demos, they kind of had about a year, because I think Mike mentioned, like, they started in 1980, and I think they had like a year's worth of songs that they never really put out, which were a bit kind of more standard song structures, like what a band would do. And I feel like once they got to Chronic Town and the single they put out before that, which was Radio Free Europe, backed with Sitting Still, they had figured out, like, they had unlocked it, and they were kind of like, they unlocked what was special about them, I think, with Chronic Town, which, especially that initial run of albums for REM and that EP, I feel like is nearly flawless. Like, it's one of the great runs of albums in American music.
It is the album itself is what, five tracks, is that right?
Five tracks, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I mean, so you said all, like, as an EP, all five of those. To be honest with you, I didn't even recognize a lot of the titles, so that's how, like, a novice of REM I am. But I mean, but they're all solid, because I don't think there's any, quote unquote, there's no hits on it, it's for sure.
Gardening
at Night.
Right, yeah. We're both, it's funny. Yeah, Gardening at Night's probably the biggest one, the most recognized, because they've played that multiple times in concert, and I think it's such a ballad for REM also. And
Wolf's Lower, I think, is one of their really outstanding tracks as well. I think Gardening at Night's the one that shows up on the best of compilations, though.
Yes. If it's the one from Chronic Town that shows up the most. I think it was, the IRS years, it shows up and everything, and it's such a great song, and it shows what REM was going to become, with the first couple albums and everything, even more than Carnivals of Souls, but I also like 1 Million too. It's a great song.
I do think, Mike, that Chronic Town did not make the splash that Murmur, their debut album, made. However, like, Murmur is one of those kind of perfect 10 out of 10 albums. I believe it was a big deal at the time that Rolling Stone listed that as the best album of 1983 over Thriller. And because there was a lot
that's a bold statement.
There's a lot of brouhaha of like who are these upstarts that we've never heard of, that. And so I don't think I think Chronic Town suffers a little bit by coming immediately before Murmur, because Murmur is so perfect and so iconic.
Mm-hmm. It is. Every song on Murmur is perfect in a lot of ways, and it's, to some people, that's the perfect REM album, and more than the poppy years later on. And it's interesting because you have a lot of different camps with REM, and that you have the IRS people versus the Sony people, and and
there's always that period where, like, the band, quote unquote, sells out because they become popular, right? And they start doing music videos and are on MTV, and and everybody's like, and they're selling out arenas, and then the early fans are always like backlashing against that a little bit, right?
Well, it's kind of interesting too, because with REM, you don't see REM actually in any of their videos until
much later,
until like The One I Love and stuff like that. That was one of the first that had them in it, because even End of the World as We Know It video, didn't have them in it. It had this kid, going through this old house and everything.
What I find interesting about that too is, with REM, it wasn't an overnight sensation. I feel like it was a very slow build for them to become a big mainstream band. And I think they were arguably, for a period of a few years in the late 80s, early 90s, like one of the biggest bands in the world. But that they didn't get a top 10 hit until their fifth album. And Losing My Religion didn't come out until like 2 albums after that. It's interesting with REM how it's almost like it's hard to say that they sold out because it was so incremental with them in terms of like releasing videos, and now they're going to lip sync in videos, and now they're going to do something that gets played on top 40 radio rather than rock radio. It's very interesting too when you compare it to something like Nirvana, who hit big with their second album, but with Nirvana, it was like they had come out of nowhere and suddenly they were on the cover of every magazine. I feel like with REM, it was a gradual progression.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
it's a
took
good
them
way to
like
put
6
it.
years to become an overnight success, right?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. And it was like, and it was funny too, because like Mike Stipe used to swear up and down he would never lip sync in a video, and then you see shiny happy people.
I think Losing My Religion was the first video he lip synced in, and it was a big deal at the time. He was doing interviews about lip syncing in it because Stand on the previous album was a very big hit. But the video was a little more, avant-garde.
They were all dancing and everything.
Yes.
So. Well, they certainly have a lot of cred, coming from a college town, a legit college town in Georgia, which you wouldn't think would be that progressive, but in this case, since they are on kind of riding the backs of, I think, 6 years earlier, the B-52s made like their debut from out of Athens. It made it kind of started to get big and everything. So it was not unprecedented,
No.
They weren't just this sort of like Georgia band, right? They were more of a college band, come from a college town, talking about like, I don't know, college topics, right? Like it wasn't like they weren't just like saying like, I mean, later on maybe, but they weren't just having songs like, like about love and having, meeting a girl and all that kind of stuff, right? They weren't doing pop songs.
Well, here's where I disagree with what you're saying, Mike, is I think Southern iconography is so essential to REM, especially in those early years, in terms of like, not necessarily like cars and like, I think one of the things that set them apart was they weren't singing about cars and girls, but I think the experience of living in the South, and they used a lot of colloquialisms in their lyrics, even up to like Automatic for the People is a slogan from a barbecue restaurant in Georgia. So I do think there is something essentially
interesting
Southern about REM, but it's not the usual stereotype you would think of as the South.
No. Right. It's a contrast to the state, like the what you would think of as the South.
Well, it's interesting too, though, because Athens at the time was such a hub for a lot of bands. It wasn't just REM. There was a lot of other bands that were starting to break big, but REM was the one in that era that made it up to national prominence and stuff. And it's really interesting to do. I put Athens at that time in the same category as San Francisco in the late 60s, or LA in that same era, but also Seattle in the early 90s with grunge and everything. I think Athens, Georgia was about the same time, the same thing. And you got some amazing artists who came out of that era, and, B-52s, Indigo Girls, REM, and there's a few others that, might have not gotten as big, but they are very well known in the South or locally and everything. And they got airplay just as much. And it's, pretty awesome to see, the different types of music and everything. Because if you put B-52s and REM and the Indigo Girls together, each one's completely different.
Right.
And everything. Where with grunge, you put Nirvana next to Pearl Jam, next to Alice in Chains and such, you could tell it's all grunge, type thing.
But that's the umbrella of progressive music is that wide, right? That you can like, because all three bands that you're talking about, they are stylistically very like different, but they are all under like you would find them all playing on 120 minutes on MTV, right? Like it's like they're all into that banner, right?
The first time I got to see the Indigo Girls in concert in Washington D.C. when I was in college, Michael Stipe got up on stage with them and sang Kid Fears because their first album had just come out. And I was like, oh my God, that's Michael Stipe. And the girl I was with was like, who? It's like that was our only date. So,
Yeah, and I think on that self-titled Indigo Girls album, the other three guys all play on a different song as
Mhm,
well.
mhm.
I think I'll try to be true. Um, and I think coming out of a scene like Athens, I think every so often, like you said, Mike, things coalesce in a certain moment, and you get a lot of the burst of creativity from a lot of different points. And I think even if people don't know some of those other Athens bands like Pylon or Love Tractor, I think having bands of that caliber around, like, undoubtedly spurred REM
Mhm.
to greater heights.
Mhm.
I think
Oh,
just
very much so.
being in that primordial soup, if you will.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
But you guys had that up in Boston too, multiple times and everything
Yeah.
with different bands and stuff. So it's interesting too. And as REM grew and with their first couple albums, each album was completely different. It was not the same. And that's one of the things I loved about it. It was a different sound. You could see them evolving as musicians, songwriters, and they just were maturing. And the second album, Don't Go Back to Rockville, or and so many other great songs. Pilgrimage is an amazing song, and you have so many great things coming out of it. And you know, you saw them, and as their popularity grew through the first four albums were like almost like this is REM, and then five was when they exploded out to the world, and MTV really discovered them as mainstream. You didn't see, It's the End of the World or The One I Love and songs like that on 120 minutes anymore. You saw that in regular
Yeah. Yeah.
airplay.
They escalated. Yeah. They broke free from that. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, let's one thing that Kevin said I want to go to, because you said that Chronic Town, it's right there. The band is clicking. What they would become is already in that first album. What is it about REM that sets them apart? What it is about REM that really resonates with you? What do you really appreciate about the band, about the music?
I think it's the chemistry between the four of them, and I think it's a very unique chemistry because I think you've got Peter Buck, who's very cool, and you've got Mike Mills, who's very musical, and you've got Bill Berry, who's very down to earth, and then you've got Michael Stipe, who's very pretentious. And somehow the alchemy of that created something entirely unique.
Exactly. You would not expect the four of them to even be friends or hang in the same type of group. And they clicked so well together.
And the
And
way
that,
they would take these kind of birdsy and jangle chords and mix it with Gang of Four bass, along with the kind of inscrutable imagistic lyrics that, as Mike said, you can barely make out sometimes. I think there's something really magical about them in a way a lot of bands aren't.
it was always funny when sometimes I go to karaoke and people would do The One I Love or they would do Fall on Me. And Fall on Me, you could barely understand what the hell Mike Stipe is saying in the song. And it's amazing because, the words are up there. It's like, those are what the words are. Okay. Because if you listen, we used to joke about it when IRS gave up REM and REM went to Sony.
They went to
Um,
Warner's.
uh, did they go to Warner? I thought they went to
They went to
Sony.
Warner's.
When they went to Warner's, then when they left IRS, so they it was funny. We used to joke saying that they must have had a clause that Mike Stipe would have to take diction lessons or something so people could understand him more.
Yeah, he definitely embraced being able to understand him in those, like, about four albums in, which in some ways was for good and for some ways was for ill, I think, because I think some of his lyrics on the later albums are a little lacking. So sometimes I'm like, I kind of miss not understanding him.
Yeah, I could see that. Definitely understand that. But some of the early stuff by them was soul moving. It was touching. The songs, the music, talk about the passion is one of my favorite REM songs. And it is, you know, and the videos they put out with it were done by artists, not by music producers or, video producers. These were done by local artists and stuff. And, you know, talk about the passion. That one, the video was talking about the homeless back in 1983 and everything. It was just amazing.
This was a band that made me, as a 15 and 16-year-old, think that wearing a paisley vest was a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, I do think, and I think when they were sliding into the mainstream in the late 80s, I feel like there was something going on in the culture then. I know last week you all discussed the Pee Wee Herman Christmas special. I feel like the emergence of stuff like that, and R.E.M. going into the mainstream, and what was going on with David Lynch and Twin Peaks suddenly becoming a huge hit on television. I felt like suddenly America was ready for the avant-garde in a mainstream way. And I don't know if it was like coming out of 8 years of Reagan or what, but it definitely seemed like that was a moment.
It also seemed like definitely to me that the media, the record companies were really giving them this is America's U2 treatment.
Absolutely.
Like, this is like everything that you liked about U2. This is like the American version. I mean, it's not musically the same at all, but at least as far as, you got your pretentious lead singer, you've got your social political lyrics, you've got a different kind of sound that yet is unique to them. Like, if you are on the radio, I mean, even me, if I'm listening to a track and an R.E.M. song comes on, I know it's R.E.M. Like, it's like they are distinct. They have a signature sound.
Yeah, I agree completely with that, Mikey. It was within the first 30 seconds, it's an R.E.M. song, if even that long. And that's what's kind of cool about it. And it's
you don't even have to wait for Stipe to sing. Like, it's an R.E.M. song before he even opens his mouth, or like mumbles his semi-open.
Yes and no. The first couple albums, no, because each one was completely different to a point and everything. And it's interesting too, because I love R.E.M. I will say that to my dying day, but I think the band lost a lot of its soul after Bill Berry left the band. I don't think it was the same. It was like almost like something cracked with it. You broke the chemistry in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Bill Berry was the member of the band who I think had the best ear for saying, like, I think this works. I think this is too long. I don't think we should do this. I do feel like, especially in the first few albums after he left, they really needed an editor. They really needed someone to say, like, more of this, less of that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that completely.
When was that?
He left after New Adventures in Hi-Fi, which was their 10th album.
Oh, wow.
Which was, I think, 95.
Okay.
So I mean, he was built, like, R.E.M. put out, like, I think 10 like really, really great albums with the four of them, and then Bill Berry left, and they put out some albums that, I mean, they have things to recommend them. They're not worthless, but they're not up to the snuff of the first 10.
They're not peak R.E.M.
No, it's not their Imperial phase.
Right,
and I do think the last two albums they put out were a bit more of a return to form, and I think there was a feeling on their end that they wanted to go out with some stronger albums. So I think that's one of the reasons they called it quit after that. Also, their insane record deal that they signed with Warner's in the mid 90s had finally run out for, like, I think it was $90 million for a certain number of albums.
Exactly. They finished their contract and that was it, pretty much. And it was interesting too, because I remember when Bill Berry collapsed on stage, and because he had a brain aneurysm that ruptured, and it was not a pretty sight. And they gave him time. Hey, take your time, recover. They didn't push him at all to come back or anything. And when he came back, he just didn't feel the same spark, and he decided to retire from music completely. It's not like he said, "Oh, I'm going to go do my side projects or anything." He literally left music.
Yeah, and that was their first tour in years.
Right.
They took a bunch of years off from touring, basically at their commercial peak. After the Green tour, for Out of Time and Automatic for the People, they did not tour.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Monster came out, it was a big deal that R.E.M was going to tour again. They're playing these enormous venues.
Mm-hmm. I think they were in Europe when it happened or something.
Yes.
And so, yeah, and it was a big shock. And, you know, they had, and as the band started getting more popular, of course they had to keep on adding members to the band, and it started getting, the juggling. You could tell the chemistry was changing anyway with it and everything. And but it was interesting because you had some of their biggest albums. Automatic for the People was huge.
And I think for a lot of people, not me, but a lot of people think that's their finest moment. I think it's very, very good. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people will cite Automatic for the People as their best album. Monster, I know, does not loom as large in their critical reputation, and I didn't like it so much at the time, but I've come around on it a little
I have too.
in recent years.
I can actually now listen to What's the Frequency Kenneth, and and not,
I think,
not throw up in my mouth.
I
You
mean,
know.
even at the time, I loved Strange Currencies. I thought that was a really pretty song.
Mhm.
And but some of the stuff after, like I really liked Let Me In, and I think Crush with Eyeliner is a cool song.
Oh, it's
And
awesome.
there's a lot of good stuff on that album. And New Adventures in Hi-Fi is kind of long and dense and weird, but I think that album is also like very, very strong.
Hmm. No, exactly. What was the other one that I liked by them in their later years? What's Bad Day? I think it was called.
Yeah, Bad Day was like an extra track on a best of they
Hmm.
put out. Like they did a best of the Warner Brothers years,
Hmm.
I think in 2003, and Bad Day was kind of like the new song.
Hmm.
Um I
But
think
to me, it felt like it was like almost like a throwback though to
it
some
was
of
an
their.
old song.
Yeah.
It was, I think it was a song they had, and they kind of reworked part of it for End of the World as We Know It. But then they re-recorded it for that best of. So that's
Yeah.
probably why you like it.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, it explains it awesomely. But they also did at the time, they did a John Lennon tribute album, and they did Dream Number 9 for the John Lennon song, and it was amazing.
Oh, there are some really great songs in those later albums too. I think At My Most Beautiful off Up is fantastic. I really like Why Not Smile. Um, I think Around the Sun is generally considered to be their nadir, and I would co-sign that. I think that album sounds really limp. But the last two albums had some great tunes as well. So I really
um
oh, pardon. What were you gonna say,
No,
Mike?
absolutely. No, absolutely. I was just moving on because I wanted to make sure we get this in, because both of you have been fortunate enough to have seen them live. Mike, I think chronologically you saw them earlier. So what was it like seeing REM? What was the REM live show like?
Um, it's interesting seeing them earlier. It was very raw. It was very fresh. It was like seeing a mix between a punk rock band and James Taylor in some ways. And
That's okay.
well, because
Interesting.
you had, the rest of the band, Mike Mills, Peter Buck, and Bill Berry, you know, going at it and everything. And basically at the early years, Mike Stipe at first didn't want to even acknowledge the audience and everything. He was like, ultimately shy, or he didn't, he was artsy or whatever he was. He just didn't want to can't do anything with the audience. But later, like,
Did that work live, or was
oh,
it a
it
put off?
oh no, it worked perfectly. He was singing to the
Okay.
at with his back to the band, to the audience, and singing it to the band and everything when I first saw him. And then later, of course, he started becoming more of a showman, and started growing with it. And by the time, I think the last time I saw them was, I want to say mid 90s was one of the last time I saw them, was probably, it was after Bill Berry had left, so it didn't even feel like the same band. It was just this huge production. They had other keyboardists, they had all these, a different drummer, other guitarists, and it was just like, oh wait, there's Peter, there's Mike, and there's Michael, and it was just like trying to figure it out and everything. So it was definitely, they grew and grew and grew, and it was like, okay, I'm not going to go see them anymore after that last time.
The first time I saw them, which was my first concert, so I didn't have a lot to measure it
to compare
against,
it to, right?
but they had definitely figured out by that point how to play to a big room. And as Mike said, like, Stipe was more of a showman at that point, and he was doing a lot of stuff like,
Where'd you see
banging on a chair with a stick. I think, as I said, it was Great Woods.
Oh,
And
right.
the last time I saw them on their last tour was also at Great Woods. It wasn't called that then, but that was in 2008. For my birthday, my wife got me like third row tickets to see R.E.M. then, and I thought it was great at that point. It was only the three of them and a drummer. I think it was William Reefkin, who had drummed in Ministry before that, who I think has passed away since. And Peter Holsapple might have been doing some extra instruments. But the show was great. I had a blast. And for the encore, Johnny Marr from the Smiths, who was in the opening band, came out and did Pretty Persuasion and Fall on Me with the band, which was, if you're not going to have Bill Berry, you have Johnny Marr from the Smiths. That'll do.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
it's
pretty
like,
awesome.
I'll accept that one. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I think maybe when you saw them, Mike, they hadn't figured out how to be a band without Bill Berry. I think on that last tour, which they weren't billing as their last tour, they were touring the Accelerate album, and it was just sort of another R.E.M. tour. But I was really up for seeing them. I had not seen them in years, and they were great. And I think when they put out Collapse Into Now, they didn't tour it, and they just said, like, we're calling it a day as a band. They never did a final tour.
That sounds about
right.
no.
Yeah, because as of what, I think 2011 is when they officially pulled the plug.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Do the others, are they still active musically?
Oh,
yes. Bill Berry even has a new band out, and Peter Buck does a music festival in Mexico that he puts on, and he puts out a lot of vinyl only albums. Mike Mills plays around. My friend Josh plays in a band called the Baseball Project with Peter Buck and Mike Mills,
wow.
who I saw in a very tiny club, and they did Don't Go Back to Rockville, which I thought was fantastic. And
that's awesome. No, I just saw, actually, I saw Mike Mills about 2 months ago at the Atlanta Symphony Hall. He did a project with the ASO, basically turning REM music into symphony music. And he actually created his own concerto, and he also played with this amazing fiddle player, and it was awesome. And it was like, because the whole first part of the show was all REM music, played by the Atlanta Symphony. And then for the second part, Mike Mills came out and played with he had like a quartet or something, and had the symphony playing in the background. And then, and he was playing his new stuff. And then he sat at the piano and started playing Night Swimming. The audience just like exploded. It was just awesome.
And I think because of that crazy $80 or $90 million deal they signed with Warner's in the mid 90s, right before record sales really collapsed, they don't really have to do anything for the money. It seems like they just kind of do what interests them, which is
Sure.
cool. I do think that one of the things I find interesting about REM in the 2020s is I don't think REM have much of a cultural footprint, especially with people younger. Like you don't hear them referenced as like a big influence that often. You don't, you don't hear them on the radio that much compared to, I think, some of the contemporaries they had at the time, like say U2 or even something like The Cure, I think are a bigger deal than REM. I feel like REM have in a way been like weirdly forgotten.
That is interesting. Yeah, I was wondering, as getting ready to ask that question as we're getting ready to wrap up, but what is their legacy? Like, what is the legacy of REM, do you feel?
That's a good question because REM, they slowly creeped across, and in a good way. They started influencing, and a lot of like the newer bands, some of the newer bands now credit REM for as their inspirations and such. And that's pretty cool to hear when you hear that type of thing. Do I think REM has the lasting factor like when you think of giants of the 80s and stuff? No, I don't. To me, in my heart, yes, because they're one of my favorite bands. But to the general public, no. It's like when I played it, like was playing it for William or something. He's like, "Oh, this is cool. Can we listen to this?" It's not, younger kids don't go, "Oh, I want to listen." The younger kids, if they want to hear something old, they'll want to hear the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or something, or even from the 80s, Tom Petty, or some of the other punk rock bands, the Smiths or something. They won't go, "Oh, REM," type thing. But I put them in the same category as the Talking Heads, the Cars, all those type of bands and everything. I think they were one of the biggest bands of the late 80s, early 90s. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing REM. And you hear REM now on the oldies station, which is
In the supermarket.
yeah.
And I do think a lot of bands, especially bands who have a big underground following, who are trying to move into the mainstream, I think REM are the signposts they use of how to do that right. I think REM did that more successfully than most bands in terms of, I don't think fame hit them all at once. So I think they dealt with it better than a lot of bands did. Like you look at, say, I mean, Nirvana's the obvious example of how badly that can go. But even Pearl Jam seemed to, hit it really big and then shy away from it immediately. So I think REM are a band that people look to for that as well. And I also think they're one of the great American bands, even if they're not as canonized as I think they should be. I think the music is strong enough that it's due for a rediscovery. I mean, all I think it'll take is like one needle drop in a Stranger Things episode, and people will be all about REM again.
that you know what, that is definitely a possibility. And the other thing about them too, I think that's a credit to them. And this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it was 4 guys, core, until almost to the, like, pretty much to the end. It wasn't like there was not a lot of drama with the band. It wasn't like band members, they didn't split up and have a great dramatic thing and people went solo and stuff like that. It was mainly just like these guys in this band for the length of time that they were relevant.
Has any band broken up so amicably? Like, you never hear any of them say a bad word about the other. If they have like a reissue coming out, they'll do interviews together. They really just are like, well, we did this for 30 years and we feel like we did everything we wanted to do, and now we want to do some other stuff. There don't seem to be any hard feelings. I genuinely don't think they're going to get back together. unless it's for, I could see them playing like a one-off show for some sort of charity or political cause, perhaps at
Right.
some point. But that's it. Like, I don't see them ever putting out another album or anything like that.
No, I don't either. And I don't see them doing the big comeback tour of REM and everything. You know, it's like I just heard an interview recently with Mike Stipe, and he's getting ready to put out a solo album. And they asked him, you know, what about the other members of, you know, REM? I said, and he was like, oh, they're doing good, you know, basically, and that was it. He didn't say anything else about them or anything. And it's like that says it all right there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So as we finally wrap up, one last question. We're celebrating the debut of Chronic Town, but you know, and feel free to pick that if you want. But I'm just wondering for listeners out there, especially people who are not as familiar with REM, if you have something that you can recommend that everybody, even if you're an old fan or a novice, whatever, what is something absolutely that they need to check out from REM? What is a track, an album, a EP, a whatever? I don't know. We'll start with you, Kevin.
This is hard. I'm gonna go with their second album, Reckoning, which is not as beloved as Murmur, but I think it has higher highs than Murmur. I think the really good songs on Reckoning are some of the best really good songs on any album ever. And it starts off like a mother effer with Harbor Coat into Seven Chinese Brothers into South Central Rain. So I'm going to say their second album, Reckoning, is what I think people should check out. But you would be hard pressed to do wrong with any of their first 7 or 8 albums.
Mm.
That's a good way.
Mike, what about you?
Damn it, I hate agreeing with this guy, you know, because it's true. It is there. You cannot go wrong with any of their first. I'm going to go for their first 7 albums also. But it's interesting too because those albums, I'm more particular to the IRS years than the Warner years. And, you know, when they became, you know, more popular and, you know, I like Shiny Happy People. I like Night Swimming. I like Man on the Moon is a fantastic song and everything. And, but, you know, for REM, you know, for me, Fall on Me or South Central Rain or, you know, Talk About the Passion, you know, or Radio Free Europe, awesome songs. And I can listen to those all day and not get tired of listening to it. But I'm going to put out there a fun compilation of REM songs done as a tribute album. It's called Surprise Your Pig. If you ever get a chance to listen to it, it has a lot of alternative bands doing their take of REM music, but none of the songs sound like REM songs. They do them to their own take, which is awesome. Because a lot of times when you hear tributes and stuff, it's the bands trying to sound like the actual band.
Sure.
This is done by all smaller bands, and I think a lot of the bands are from around Athens and everything, and it's awesome. It is.
And Jawbreaker, who eventually supplanted REM in the favorite band category for me, cover Pretty Persuasion on that compilation.
Exactly. So it is a great CD if you ever get a chance to listen to it and everything. The version of It's the End of the World is beyond belief on that one. So
I love that there's a cover of We Walk by Steel Pole Bathtub on there that's just noise, that's just the sound of people playing pool. Like, that's our cover of We Walk.
Well, very cool. I am this is awesome. I learned a lot, actually. I knew of REM, obviously. As Mike pointed out, you couldn't really throw a rock in the 80s or late 80s without and early 90s without, you know, hitting an REM song, right? And or a video or whatever. And they certainly made an impact. And it's interesting how their legacy has changed. And so, like Kevin said, I would not be surprised if something, you know, at some point puts them right back, you know, right back in it. Like if it can happen with Kate Bush, it can happen with R.E.M.
Oh
right?
man. And I know you can make you can make your shiny happy pupil cracks, but on that same album, you've got Country Feedback, which is one of their like darkest and best and most affecting songs. It's got Stipe's best lyrics. Oh my God. So let's, even when they were doing these kind of songs that were a little weirdly dopey, they were still putting out songs that were like brain meltingly good.
Mm, mm. Awesome. Well, thanks guys for talking all about R.E.M. and we will be right back after we take this quick break.
It's the end of the world as we know it, folks, but we feel fine. All right. This is the break part. Hi,
Yep.
YouTube people. How are you?
For YouTube. Yay.
Yes. All right. Let's close
We're
up the
still here.
show. All right. 3, 2. So that's going to wrap up this interesting new format of an episode for us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It's been a ton of fun. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me. I so appreciate this opportunity to geek out about R.E.M., a band I have loved for most of my life.
Yeah, and you know, I was already an old person already when you were starting going to see that. Anything you want to shout out about or yell out about?
Sure. I will say that I have a podcast called Gleaming the Tube, which is about movies that involve skateboarding in some capacity, however minor. And we're about to record this week an episode about Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Pee-wee's Big Holiday for people who enjoyed.
More Pee-wee.
Yes, for people who enjoyed last week's Pee-wee centric episode of Earth Station 1. And Mike, you should watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It is the best thing Tim Burton has ever done. I will also say that next month in Boston, Massachusetts, on Martin Luther King Jr. weekend is the Aresia Science Fiction and Fantasy Convention. And I will be there doing a few panels. I believe I'll be doing, the schedule's not out yet, but I believe I'm moderating a panel on the year in Star Wars. And I'm going to be a panelist on the year in TV. As of now, as DragonCon fans know, the subject to change, but that's where things stand. So if you're in the area, come out to that.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
We'll have links to those in our show notes.
Because I know Kevin Eldridge has talked about Aresia for years to us and everything.
Yeah.
That's how I know him. That's probably how I know the network. But yeah, I think Kevin Eldridge is going to be a panelist there as well, but I will leave it to him to announce the things he's doing.
Well, fine. We will let him do that then. Cool. And Mr. Mike, we made it through another one, my friend.
We did. And as always, it's my pleasure.
Anything you want to shout out about, sir?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting since we're talking about R.E.M. And Athens and Georgia and everything. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 1993. And when I moved here, and when I quickly, one of the things that made me, when I first visited Atlanta, one of the things that first like made me think this is a cool place to be, was a station that started in 1992 called 99X. It was an alternative rock station, progressive music. They played R.E.M., Green Day, No Doubt, like, you know, you name it. And I discovered, it was a great time. I discovered a lot of bands because of that station. And it did a lot. They did a lot of events. They hosted festivals. It was, they were an amazing station. I was a big fan. I even was a card carrying member of the 99X Club. But as you know, as what happens with radio and all the stupid things that go on there with corporations and all that kind of stuff, 99X died out. I think officially it was like 2008 or something, but by that time they were not relevant and they were long past their muster. But they are back. 99X is now on. It's a nostalgia station, so they're not playing like you know, they're not trying to recreate the magic. Instead, it's just more like, hey, you remember this stuff, these songs and everything like that. But it's now on, they were on 99.7. Now they're on 100.5. But you know what? I listened to them the other day. I was in the car. I don't usually listen to the radio at all. I usually listen to podcasts, but I turned the radio on and I switched it to 100.5. And the first thing I heard was the 99X, like, you know, bumper. And it just took me right back to the early days when I moved here and all that great music that came out in the early 90s, and that station was an experience. So nostalgia worked for me on that respect. I kind of was hoping that they might, do something, more relevant, but we'll take what we can get. But I'm glad to see that 99X is back.
That's pretty cool and everything. I heard for right now, until the first of the year, they don't even have any of the announcers or anything. It's all
Yeah,
automated.
I didn't hear any DJs. I just heard they just did tracks and then and ads, of course, and then the bumper, which is the old bumper. So I don't know what their plans are as far. I mean, to get the gang back together, Fran and Steve and all those other people. I mean, that would be probably pretty difficult. But and maybe a bit sad. But I would I'm not saying I'm going to listen every day, but it's nice to know that they exist, and it's a cool place on the dial that I can hit if I want to just chill out and listen to some cool alternative tunes.
What song got you the most pumped?
Well, right after the 99X, I was telling you, right after I heard the 99X bumper, it went right into Pump It Up by Elvis Costello, and I was like, I'm done. Like, this is like I'm here. I'm sold. Like, this is like crank it up. That sold me that they're back. So very cool. And I don't know, I mean, I guess the kids today will probably think of this as an oldie channel. Like when I was riding around with my dad and he was listening to like the 50s and 60s tunes, and I was just like, oh, it's the oldies channel. So this is my oldies channel.
Okay, Grandpa, calm down.
Yeah. And get out of my yard.
Exactly. Damn kids. Damn kids. One thing I wanted to do a quick shout out about is, we're coming up to the holidays. A lot of people are, shopping and going to, celebrate with friends and families. But before you do that and everything, some of these natural disasters that have hit, around the country over the last year have not gone away, folks. And especially down in places like Fort Myers, Florida, where the hurricane pretty much destroyed the community and such. You got to, try to think about, let's be thankful for what you have and everything. And if you have any extra shekels or money, I'm not going to say, don't donate towards the ESO Patreon or anything, but,
Not gonna go that far.
I'm not going to go that far, folks. No, no, no. But no, seriously, the American Red Cross is doing an amazing job to be able to help a lot of these peoples who have had their houses destroyed, and they haven't even had a chance to rebuild yet. Um, this was devastating. It's one of the worst natural disasters that have happened in the United States over the last decade. And it's just, devastating, especially now you're getting close to the holidays and you don't have a home, or you're living in a FEMA trailer, or worse, or, even stuck in a hotel somewhere, because you had to evacuate and you couldn't go back to your home. you know this is, the time of year when you look at, yourself in the mirror and go, I've got this and this going for me. Why not help out another individual? Why not do that? And, I try to help out in my little ways, and hopefully you could too also. And, when I say helping out, you know, it could be financial, it could be with your time. Go volunteer at a shelter, go volunteer at a soup kitchen, go volunteer at, you know, any kind of, charity event. There's always people looking for help and such. And, but there's also people looking to take advantage of it too. So vet out who you're volunteering or giving to charity with to make sure they're legit, and that's just something to be careful for. And, I really think when you put your head to it, I think it's a great thing to be able to help another individual who's not as fortunate as what you have. And I feel fortunate to be able to do this podcast every week. Well, now twice a week. So, it's pretty awesome that we're able to do that. And you know what? Running into 2023, it's only going to be bigger and better for all of us. Let's help with those who can't, hold up for themselves and need the help. Sometimes people are too proud to ask for the help. And so just do it, folks. That's what you need to do. All right, off my soapbox now. So we are going to be back again next week. And our next week is going to be a very interesting one. We are having 2 episodes out again next week, folks. You join us early in the week when Mike and I are going to be reviewing Wednesday. That's right. We are going to be looking at the Netflix series, and it was awesome. I just can't wait to talk about that. It was
The show that has my 11-year-old niece asking me about the Cramps.
Well, that's awesome. That is awesome. That is really awesome. It introduced the Cramps to a whole new generation.
Mm.
And oh god, that dance was just awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, how many Wednesday Adams are we going to see now at Dragon Con next year? So
Yeah, we already saw quite a few, so yeah, that's probably triple,
yeah,
if not,
Mhm.
yeah, tenfold.
exactly. So Wednesday we're going to be doing that, and then we're going back to the movies, and we were looking at Avatar: Way of the Water. Yay! Woo! Ha! So you can tell I'm excited about that one, folks. So please join us for, and tell all your friends that Earth Station One is available twice a week, not just once. So we're going to be bringing you twice the fun, twice the adventures. It's going to be a ton of fun, folks. And of course, we definitely, as always, love to hear from you guys. So if you get a chance, please write us at feedback@earthstation1.com. Remember, you could always find Earth Station One wherever fine podcasts are found. And guess what, folks? Now Earth Station One is in video format, so we could be found up on YouTube. Please subscribe and tell all your friends about us. And we're waving at you right now. Yes, you. You know who I'm talking to. You're watching. I know you are. So there, definitely check us out. On behalf of myself, Mike Faber, of course, Mr. Mike Gordon, Mr. Kevin Cafferty, thank you for listening. And you know what? Hope everyone has a great week. And we will see you next time on Earth Station One. Peace. And we are done. Ciao, folks.
Yay.
And don't go back to Rockville and waste another year. That's my word of advice.
Everybody hurts sometimes.